the darkest nights, we find our light. Battered souls, but we won't lose sight. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial we carry on. Surviving together, never alone. Through every trial we carry on. Surviving together, we stand tall. United forever. Strength and courage will overcome. Surviving together, victorious, and never, never alone. Hand in hand, we'll face the unknown.
We see you, we hear you, and we believe you. Hey guys, have I told you I love that intro? I'm bopping my head along and singing it, especially at the end. It's awesome. Anyway, how is everyone doing on this Wednesday evening? Let's see who we have. Mary, Crystal, Shannon, Janet, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is us for right now. Oh, awesome. I'm glad you guys like it too. I'm thinking about shortening it. It's a little over a minute, like a minute and 17 seconds or something. I'm thinking about shortening it a little bit. What do you guys think? Do you think it's too long? Or do you like the song enough that going over a minute, is like, okay? I thought, well, it's like time you watch a short. Can anyone hear me? Can you give me a 5x5? Because I'm not using my mic today. I'm just relying on my laptop. Do you think a little shorter would be good? Yeah, I've been thinking about it. And every time I listen to it, I've been thinking about, yeah, Mary, that's exactly what I was thinking. Okay, good. I'm glad you guys can hear me. I let my son take the microphone because his headset finally busted. So he has it. Yeah, I'll have to work with Michelle on shortening it down a little bit. I think there's a few places we can take out, but all righty. Well, I have had a no work week so far. There is a job that I may put my resume in. I've been thinking about it, and I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. And at first, when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It's again working on sexual assault cases. However, I think, because this is what the recruiter said, I believe, so I'm assuming though that she's right, is it would be working for the insurance defense. So it's the insurance of the client company who's being sued for probably something an employee did. I'm not sure how I feel about that. And I think it depends on what type of cases they take on. If there's straight sexual assault cases and we're trying to get them to drop the case or, lose at trial or, that kind of thing, I can't. If it's just about negotiating a reasonable settlement, I can live with that. This is like the one area that I think I would say no based on my mores and values. So I've talked to some people and I've kind of decided, yeah, I'm going to throw my resume in the ring and see if I do get an interview, and then talk to them. Talking to them about the types of cases that they're doing and whatnot. Because one of the things would be to be taking notes during depositions. And I'll tell you, if it was a sexual assault victim and the defense attorney was like going hard on that victim, I wouldn't be able to take it. I mean, I'd step in. I honestly would. I would step in and I would pull that defense attorney, because he'd be on my side. I'd pull that defense attorney back and say, listen, fucker. Sorry, guys, but I get really animated and really upset about that. I will not let survivors be abused again and, railroaded or hammered, or, it's just, so yeah, we'll see. It's really great money. And it's, there's no real timeline on it. So I don't know if they'll eventually, hire internally or something like that. But, the other side of it is, if I can live with their answers, and if I do it, learning insurance defense on any level is just a really good skill for me to have, because it's different, and there's a lot of negotiation with it, not a lot of trials, because they're just settling with things. And sometimes it's, it would be the case where the insurance company, based on the policy, is not going to be liable, because for most crimes, gross negligence, that sort of thing, insurance policies don't cover it. So it's not a matter of saying to the victim, no, you can't have this. It's a matter of saying to the client, you're getting sued, dude, and your insurance ain't going to cover it, because this is an exception to your policy. So it's not going against the survivor. I can totally live with that, because their case still stands 100%. They're just going, directly after, and it's the company itself who's going to have to pay the money, not the insurance company basically reimbursing the company for that. So I can live with that, Shannon. And you're right. To a certain extent, business is business, and I love, and I've thought about that. I've also thought about the money, and could I live with doing this for a year, and I might be able to put myself in a good position to do this more. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm going to throw it in tonight, and we'll see what happens. But thanks, Crystal. I do. It is the one thing that I get totally animated about. I mean, I love, animal abuse too is another area. It's not something I'm passionate about in terms of like helping, but I can't watch any of those any Humane Society videos or PETA or anything that they put out. When they use Sarah McLachlan songs to, I got to change the channel. I can't look at animals who have clearly been abused and neglected. It just bothers me too much. Kim, you're right. To a certain extent, right is right. And that's why, depending on if they can walk me through an ordinary case, what are, one of three options or three avenues that a case generally takes for you guys? What does that look like? And if I can live with all of that, if I'm offered the job, then I can. The other thing is, I cannot see how my channel would be a conflict of interest with them, because I'm not doing anything on the legal side. I'm not giving any advice. We're not talking about bringing cases or anything. This is pure peer support and discussing things that, are pertinent to survivors and their trauma. But that's something I'm not willing to give up. I will give up that job to be able to keep the channel. So I make you that promise right now. If they tell me it's conflict of interest, then I'd say, well, thank you very much, but the channel stays. So Lacey, so glad that you're here. Did I see somebody saying hi to Mock? I thought I saw somebody saying hi to Mock, but maybe I was wrong. Oh, there you go. There you are. Yeah. You couldn't watch any child or essay videos? Yeah, I mean, it's when I was doing those two porn videos. Actually, the child one, they didn't have anything. That they had no actual porn that they were showing on that one. So if any of you are interested in watching that documentary through the link of Kids on Porn, just note that there's no porn that they're showing. It's just simply talking about what is happening with their minds. And a few people give their own case studies, their own histories of how they got from point A to point B and how that trajectory went for them, and having absolutely no sexual interest in kids. And even when they're watching kiddie porn, they still don't have a sexual interest in the kid. It's more like just an interest in the taboo subject, I think. So it was really interesting. The pet videos, no, I can't. Even when they're like, we rescued this pet, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. They're just, watch how he transformed from this to this, and it just, yeah, no. I have noticed in the last week that these grooves have gotten a lot deeper. Oh, shoot. Maybe it was the stress of this month. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. I don't know why I keep looking off to the side. I think it's because I have my window open and it's really nice out. If you guys start hearing anything, let me know. But the kids seem to have quieted down for now. You can't watch prison videos either. That's interesting. No, I can do prison videos. Those aren't a problem for me. It's the hardcore. The first one I put out, the adult porn one, that was giving these women stories, and it played some of their pieces, and some of the pieces where you could hear them, they had taken a break, and you can hear the person saying, no, I don't want to go continue on with this and stuff. And that was just heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And so that one was real tough for me. But I'm still glad I did it. And it's something that I'm going to put into a shorter video, but I think that it absolutely has to be out there. Because get this, I was watching a comedian, I'd never heard of him, Josh Johnson. He is hilarious if you've never seen him. Has tons of videos on YouTube. They're about 20 minutes. So basically his set in different comedy clubs. And he's really funny. But one of them he was talking about dating, and different things, and taking a woman back to his place. And this was part of the joke, but I won't set anything up. But what he said was, so in the moment, she grabbed my hand and put it on her throat. So indicating that that's what she wanted. And I just thought, yeah, that's a sign of the times, because 20 years ago, I really don't think you could find a whole lot of people generally who would be into that. But, that's one of the things that has, I think, come out of hardcore that's gone mainstream almost. And we've talked about that on our chat, on the channel before. But it just hit home to me how mainstream, when you have this 30 something or young 30s talking about an experience maybe 5 years ago, maybe a year ago, who knows, but obviously contemporary, and how mainstream that act has gotten. And the women wanting it, because it was the woman saying, yes, this is what I want. And I'm wondering, do they really? Or do they think they do? Or maybe they do, but the only reason they've gotten involved in it is because of how mainstream it's gotten. So it gave me a real pause. It was just very interesting, you know. Lacey, I 100% agree with you that there are a lot of times when the guy or the aggressor, the top, I guess, to put it in a different way, the other person wanted it. And in a lot of cases, it cannot be true. In a case like this, where she's taking his hand and doing it for him and saying, this is what I want, on some level, she does want it. It's just kind of going to that level beneath it, peeling back that cover and saying, okay, why do you want it? How did you get this thought into your brain? That's what I want to know. I want to know how this piece, out of everything else, got to be so mainstream. So it just really, yeah, absolutely true, Crystal. And this is a point that we're going to talk about later today as to what's normal for you. If X, Y, and Z is all you've known, then you think that that's what it's supposed to be because that's what it's always been for you. And you were never taught differently. No one ever told you differently. So all you have to go on is your experiences. And right, Shannon. And it's, it's still not a lot of people's things. I think that there are some people who, because it has become so mainstream, would try it. That concerns me, because if you're with a partner who doesn't know what they're doing and is just trying it too, they put too much pressure for too long. No, not for me either. I just wouldn't want to risk anything. That, and I bruise so easy. I mean, I would just have fingerprints on my neck. So we're just not going to go there. All right. Yeah. The book was one thing, but then, of course, they had to make it into a movie. And then, of course, they had to make the sequel. Yeah, there is a whole community like that. BDSM is a thing, and there are grade levels within that, in terms of how extreme you like things. Say for spanking, there's, things that are soft that you can spank with, and then there's things that are incredibly hard, are going to leave extreme marks. And it depends on where you fall in that. And I often wonder, though, the people who like more pain than less pain, I wonder where they got that from. So there's a piece of me that wants to say, did they learn that because it was something that they were taught when they were younger, that this is how it is, and so their mind did conflate the two? Now, I do know, just from a brain chemical standpoint, that when you get to a certain level of pain, the brain switches that to pleasure and releases then your dopamine. Very interesting effect. So it just, just really, I wonder about a lot of those things since we talk about so much of it. And obviously, when we're talking about it, it's, a non consensual thing. And so, um, yeah, tying up and things like that. And, again, I'm not going to, if it is 100% truly consensual between two people, knock yourself out. I don't care what you do. It's just where people think that they should be doing something because that's the way that they've known it. And speaking of which, I mean, that kind of leads us right into what we were going to talk about today. Child on child essay, but within a family. So whether it's siblings or say first cousins, I don't want to get too far out, second or third cousins or whatever, because I'm really talking about the closeness to the family. So I'll say siblings, maybe a niece or nephew, if it happens to be like that one sibling is 6 and the other one's 26, they've got that big gap in between. So that 26-year-old has a small child as well. If you're close. So that's what I'm limiting this to. Right. Cousin, that would actually be that. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I want to limit it to, because there is just an extra wrinkle. There's an extra level of difficulty that occurs with child on child. For one, we've spoken about that. Then we've spoken a little bit about the incest aspect of it, father, daughter, mother, daughter, mother, whatever. We've spoken about that as well, where you have an adult and a child. But child on child, there's an extra responsibility that falls upon the people if they do discover that something's been happening that is not present in the other situations. So let's go back just a little bit and review. So we know that child on child abuse happens, and it can happen within any age range. We're going to talk about under 18 as a child. Based on how old the abuser is, with the child aspect, that is where you need to be very careful when you find out about this. If a child was to disclose and you find out, as a parent, you need to be able to look at how old that child is and say, okay, this is, instead of brushing it off like some parents might, this is just, kids being kids, they're playing doctor, they're just, looking at it and saying, well, where did this kid learn it? Is he old enough, or she old enough, to be able to have learned this from something outside essay, whether that's school or whether it was, a parent talk? Are they old enough to have that information? If they're not, then you need to dive deeper into that child and really speaking to that child and saying, okay, where did you learn to do this? And not only where did you learn to do this, why did you decide to do this? Very important questions, because I think it really goes to treatment of that older child, to what do we do with them in terms of treatment, in terms of punishment. Do we turn them over to the legal system? Do we deal with it in-house? I think it depends. There are so many factors. Hey, Mon, glad you could join us today. Hey, Donna. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So when you have children, there's so many factors that as a responsible parent, you need to delve into to make sure that you're not missing something, because you deal with a situation and you don't find out how that older child, say the child's 9, 10, some may have gotten a birds and the bees talk from the parent, but it's going to be pretty darn basic. And usually based just on that, that's not something that a kid's going to take that information and go, huh, let's try that out. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's how babies are made, type of thing. You don't want to miss an opportunity to be preventing yet another SA. Is that child, have they been, or are they still actively being abused? So it's critically important when you're dealing with children that they are both dealt with and that they are both considered in terms of where they are. I thought long and hard about this, and I think kind of under 13, depending on the situation, again, still factual dependent, but depending on the situation, I would not have a problem with that being dealt with in-house if the proper safety measures are being taken, meaning those kids aren't alone together. Preferably, those kids aren't in the same house together at any point, and they're both in therapy. I think when you get 13 and older, you do have a developed brain enough to say, this is not okay. Now, again, it's fact dependent, because if you have a situation like we're going to talk about where that is all they've known, and to them it is normal, and they're 14 years old, then that needs to be taken into consideration. So again, very factual dependent. So I don't have any clear-cut answers on that, and it's just a chance to be able to educate the kids. It's a chance to be able to educate the kids' parents, if it's like a cousin situation. And ideally, if the children are living in a 2-parent household, that both of those parents then realize what a problem there is and are taking appropriate action, and that it's not something that is just going to totally split up a family. Because anytime you have SA within the family, you possibly can get to warring factions, when there's disclosure. So that's really important. Right. And I am talking about where the situation is where it's a responsible parent, meaning doing the right thing, doing the education. I totally get you 100%, Donna. I was there with you. And it sucks. It really sucks not to have somebody believe you. And this is just where education comes in for our kids, this generation, to say, if you don't teach kids that something is not okay, especially if another child tells them it is okay, I think that, it's going to be so much easier for them to believe. Yeah, Janet, I feel for you. My heart goes out to you. And you're not the only one in this community who has dealt with this topic. And it's one of the reasons I decided to cover it and not to stop just at child on child, because there's just that additional wrinkle that happens when you've got kids within a family. If you have brothers and sisters, it's not like a cousin situation where they can go off and they're living in their own house somewhere else. They're there. So what do you do with them? There's no great answers. And it's surely going to depend on how the parents react to it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of parents out there, whether it's from just irresponsibility or, some, I don't want to say grudge, but, they don't like their child as much, or it's because they want to be an ostrich and just stick their head in the sand and going, no, this can't possibly be happening. It can't be very bad. And that's what that's where this education comes from, and educating adults as to what they need to know. As parents, what do you need to be looking out for? Whether that is with an uncle, whether that's with your husband, whether that is with your, Amanda the cousin, whoever it is. Being a responsible parent means listening to your child and believing them and figuring out, where did this come from? What are we going to do from here? And above all, getting that child help. They absolutely 100% need to be put into therapy immediately. And I know that can be very hard for people who don't have the means. In that instance, it does fall upon you to do the education and to be talking to your child consistently. The information's out there. You're not going to be a professional social worker or, therapist, that's for sure. But you can certainly deal with the big problems and have something to say about that. And if you know what to look for, then too, if you see your kid acting out, about the abuse, and you see your kid acting out, I think it'd be a little bit easier to take that, and once they calm down, say, okay, where did this come from? Let's identify your feelings. Because again, a lot of acting out and just, anger or temper tantrums or doing a lot of things they're not supposed to be doing is because kids have feelings inside and they don't know what to do with them, and they don't know how to process the information, and they don't know what box to put all this stuff in. And so that's where explaining it is so, so critical to the kids so that they understand. And that needs to be a consistent thing, because if you're a 6-year-old who's been abused, as a parent, or say as the therapist, what you're going to be telling them is going to be different than when that child is reached 10. Their understanding of what has happened, their capacity to process that information has grown. And so trauma from that may come out in a different way as they grow. So it's a type of thing you can't just address it once and leave it. It has to be continually addressed as that child grows up. And they need to know what's inside them so that then they'll be able to identify their triggers as they're going into adulthood and knowing what's okay and what's not okay, and being true to themselves, being strong, and knowing what their boundaries are. And that's the best that you can hope for really for any child, once that you've released them out into the world. Yeah, emotions for kids in general are so hard to deal with because until you identify them, kids don't know what they are. They just know they feel a certain way. So you have to tell them, if they say, I did really upset about blah, 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 or whatever, you're like, okay, it sounds like you're angry, or it sounds like you're jealous, or it sounds like, you're just upset, whatever it is, you have to be able to help that child identify those feelings because they're not going to know. And there can be several of them all at once, right? I mean, we don't just ever feel, I don't say ever, but rarely do we have just one feeling about something. You can have happy and sad and joy and despair, all kind of mixed in together. Yeah, Man, I'm right there with you. I have minimal sex education. I have what we learned in school, and I remember my mom telling me about it. And basically, she told me mechanics. This is what goes where when two people really love each other, type of thing. And that's about it. So I think most people our age, probably, if they got sex education at all at home, that's pretty much what it was. I haven't spoken to a lot of people who have had more than that. And again, it goes from what did their parents have? What did they educate them on? They may have gotten zero, because all of this has really come into light in the last 20 years, where it's been okay to speak more openly about sex, and the idea about actually teaching your child about sex, and not just saying, well, I told them to abstain, they're just going to abstain, and so they don't need to know about it until they get married, type of thing. Okay, let's not put blinders on and say, just because I want it to be so, it will be so. No. And that is particularly where women can get into big trouble, because they don't know their boundaries, and they get pushed and pushed and pushed. Say it's with their first boyfriend or whatever, I love you. And if he doesn't know to glove up, you're blind leading the blind. So it's just incredibly important now that we're educating our kids, and we're educating our friends. I speak with so many people, and the subject comes up mainly because I figure out a way to bring it into the conversation. I'm pathetic that way. Not pathetic, but I always want to know how people feel about it, because it is interesting, the comments that I'll get. I've spoken to people who just 100% didn't understand, because they've never been taught boundaries and taught this or taught that. So their kids weren't. I've spoken to people who thought that rape was about sex. I've gotten kind of all of it. Yeah, this is a real common one, Donna. Unfortunately, sex education being the abuse, but this sentence, and when she did, it was letting boys play there can cause problems. Okay, thanks. But what am I supposed to do about it? How am I supposed to handle it if somebody does? Kids need to be armed with this information. Otherwise, okay, it can cause problems, but they said they really wanted to, and I want them to be my friends, so maybe I'm just going to let them. They didn't say what kind of problems or, anything like that. The boys will be boys situation. That's when there's a boy abuser, whether the other child is male or female. I've heard a lot of that. Just boys will be boys, kids will be kids, and especially when it's male on male, because it's the type of thing. It's like, oh, they were just hazing, or they were just, because really, I'm going to say the last 15 years, and still we have a ways to go with male survivors. and it's an episode that I'll bring up again some point down the road. We talked about it once, but they, out of everybody, they still have a ways to go to be believed, to be understood, to be heard as survivors, because they are. You know, we still come from an era where a lot of us were taught, and a lot of us may have taught our children. A lot of this age, Gen X, may have taught, millennials. If you're a boy, if you're a strong boy, you would have just said no. You would have gotten out of there. So especially if it was an ongoing situation, why, and so that masculinity aspect, that toxic masculinity, patriarchy, it's still oppressing them a lot. And so that's where we, as female survivors, anytime we have male survivors with us, I think it's incredibly important to make sure that they know that we understand and we get it. And there is absolutely no looking down upon them because of their situation. They are just like us. They were a kid. And it's a whole other story when we're dealing with adults, but we're just talking about kids today. So I'm just going to say that. But even harder for adults, for an adult male to say, I was sexually abused as an adult. That's kind of the last hurdle, I think, when we can get past that and truly believe. Because I know some police that won't even, I've heard of some cases where the police wouldn't even take the report because they're like, you're an adult guy. You can't be abused by a girl, and you should have just said, no, if it was another guy, you should have just said, no, you should have gotten out of there. What the heck? But especially when it's female on male adults. I've heard of cases where the police won't even take the report because they're just like, that's an impossibility. So it's just not a crime. Can't be. And I think you're especially dealing with older policemen. But again, depending on what this next generation has been taught, if we haven't instilled within them how it doesn't matter, gender does not matter in terms of SA. The trauma is the same. And the emotions that you go through are the same. And the grooming is basically the same, if there is grooming. So the feelings and the responses that the child is going to give, it's going to be the same, male or female, doesn't matter. So that's kind of my little diatribe on a little chat on child, incest. And Crystal has so graciously offered to come on and talk about her experience with the abuse that she suffered by her brother within her family, and how that played out and what it meant for her. So we're going to go through parts of her story, and there may be places where we're going to stop a little bit and, kind of talk about what we've been talking about here. Exactly, Crystal. Let me get you up. Hey, you hear me okay?
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can. This is wonderful. Yeah. Exactly. And, I sound like I'm beating a dead horse when I just keep, talking about, that's why we have to educate. That's why we have to educate. But it's true. Kids grow up not knowing, they're a blank slate. And it's the information we put in their heads is all they have to work with. And if we're not putting the right information in their heads and we're not giving them the right tools to be able to deal with life, they're not going to have it. And when you have a situation such as Crystal's, where her abuse started so young, there isn't an opportunity to have even started that teaching, because you wouldn't normally expect that you need to, tell a 2-year-old about this. It's not something you would usually do. So, Crystal, why don't you just kind of start at the beginning, and you can, whether you want to give a brief overview of just kind of what happened, and then we can start and we can deal with it in a little bit more smaller pieces.
Okay. For some of you, you've heard some of my story already. I'm wanting to kind of share a little bit differently than what I've shared before. Part of it is on grooming and how my abuse started. Some of this I have sat down with both my abusers, I guess I should say 2 of my 3 abusers I have sat down with. The third one I cannot sit down with because thankfully she is no longer with us.
Okay.
I will talk about the abuse more with my brothers. One is 5 years older than me and one is 6 years older. It was the one that was 6 years older, I'll just call him M, who started the abuse.
Okay.
And some of this is some of the information I'm going to share is what he has told me.
Oh, because you were too young to remember?
Yes.
Some of this?
Yeah.
Now, just real quick, who was in your household at this point? You've still got 2 older brothers.
I have 2 older brothers, and I am the youngest of 3.
Okay, so it's just the 3 of you. And then did you have mom and dad in the picture?
Mom and dad, yeah.
Okay, got it.
We had the traditional family. And the church was also quite involved.
Okay.
My dad was a deacon and my mom was secretary treasurer.
Okay.
And so we were very involved in church, which kind of made things crazy in my head as well.
Right. Yeah.
From what M told me, before I talked to him, my earliest memory was probably around the age of 4, maybe a little bit sooner. But I also remember thinking, even at 4, I want to be out there with my brothers. I want to play our game and not the game that my brothers are playing with our babysitter at the time. And I could never really figure that out until after I had talked with my oldest brother, M.
Okay.
And I asked him, I said, when did you start abusing me? And he told me, he said, well, you were just out of diapers and starting to walk, which puts it about a year old. My earliest memory now is at a year and a half. It was started by playing doctor. Now, for me, I remember playing doctor as a fun time. With my second brother, P, when the 3 of us were playing doctor, I would love it because I'd go and I'd sharpen a pencil and use that as the needle on my brother P. And I loved that.
Right.
Because it was inflicting pain on him. Him and I never really did get along.
Oh, jeez.
But M was my favorite brother. If he was there, I was as close to him as I could get. But When mom and dad weren't home, it was another story. Yes, there was times we played the doctor when mom and dad were there, but at that point there was no touching. It was just innocent playing doctor with the Fisher Price doctor set.
Oh, yeah, I remember that well.
Yeah,
Look.
that ugly tan case that it all came in.
Ours was white. Ours was white, and like everything in there was almost white. Let me stop you just real quick because I want to put some context into this. Do you know? You said that M was also playing a game with the babysitter. Do you know how old he was when that started?
No, the game was not being played with the babysitter.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to go and play my game with M, but the babysitter was there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha, gotcha,
So
gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
and the babysitter was playing a board game with my brothers, and I was in my bedroom
All right. All right.
wanting
Gotcha.
to join in, but wanting to play our game.
And how old was he? If he's saying, about a year he started abusing you, he's 6 years older, so he would have been about 7 at the time?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's the one that started with me, and probably about 4 or 5 years before P started.
Okay.
And of course, the grooming was playing games, getting used to me letting him touch me in certain areas. By the time of a year and a half, my earliest memory now is at a year and a half under the base of the Christmas tree. And he had to lay on top of me to make me better. We were still playing doctor, but he had to lay on top of me to make me better.
Okay.
So that was kind of where he started to groom me a little bit more. And the thing is with him, every step along the way, there was a grooming to get to the next level.
Of course. Yeah.
It started out one way and then it ever so slowly progressed.
Yep.
So that I didn't really know.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're
Eventually,
so young when it started. How would you? This is your normal, you
yeah.
know? Now, let me ask you a quick question here. If your brother is only 7, how did he know this? How did he have this information? Do you know?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm assuming he was probably abused, but I don't know by who and what type.
Right. It just seems so likely because for a 7-year-old to be grooming in such a way,
Yeah.
that's just knowledge that a 7-year-old does not have.
No.
So, okay, please continue.
As I got a little bit older, the game changed from playing doctor to what we called the feeling game. So the question would become, do you want to go and feel? Whether it came from him or from me. Because I would initiate probably a good 40% of the time.
You were being able to play with your favorite brother, right?
Yeah. And it was a special game. It was just us.
Yeah.
And it was pure attention. And I never felt like I fit into our family, whether it was the 5 of us or with the cousins. Because like the majority of my cousins are 10 to 15 years older than me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's a very few that were closer in age, and the closest one in age was about 4 years older. I also have one that's a month younger than me, but her and I were like oil and vinegar.
Right.
We
Yeah.
we never got along because
See that.
she wanted to do everything Crystal did.
I totally understand what you mean though, because it's just me and my brother would have been happy with being an only child. He had no use for me whatsoever, and we never lived close to any other family. So I get that. I get that feeling like the oddball out.
Yeah. Well, we were the closest relatives were about half a mile away, and
Oh,
they were
okay.
the
So,
one with their youngest daughter was 4 years older than me.
okay.
And then the other nearest was 3 or 4 miles away
Mm-hmm.
and older.
Okay.
Most of the kids were M's age or older.
Mm-hmm.
So I had lots of male cousins, lots of female cousins,
Mm-hmm.
but it was that special time with my brother.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And as I said, it became the feeling game. So it wasn't that we were going and having sex.
Mm-hmm.
It was we were feeling each other,
Mm-hmm.
which has really screwed my thinking up and has made it really, really hard. The word feel and feeling can be extremely triggering for me.
Understood.
And at one point, I couldn't hear it or say it. And
Mm.
I would find any word that I possibly could, or I'd completely change the wording of a sentence just so
Right.
I
Right.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have to use it. Not quite so bad anymore.
Well, I'll try to
But
use emotion if I'm talking about something like that. I'll try to say emotions, and that's what we'll
that's
refer
what
to
I've
that.
I've learned to say is a lot of it is emotions.
Okay.
Um, when I think I was probably 5, maybe going on 6. Um, at that point, see, P and I fought like two cats in heat. So we were constantly fighting. And so mom and dad never allowed us to be home together alone and wouldn't let Em look after the two of us. And
Do you
this
think
one
she knew
time,
why? Did she have a reason why?
because we fought so much.
Oh, okay, just
And
because
she
of
just,
that.
yeah.
Okay,
And she
got it.
didn't think Em was old enough because there's only 16 months between Em and P.
Oh, wow. They're
Yeah, they're
they're close.
close in age. And this one day they did leave P at home with us, and he actually walked in on us playing our game in the living room.
Okay.
And when he walked in, he kept saying, "Stop or I'll tell." I couldn't understand why he would want to tell. I was
Mm,
like, it's a game. It's
right.
no big deal. So both Em and I encouraged P to join in. And then it became the three of us.
Okay.
But that was the only time when the three of us were in the room together and
Okay.
and we were all touching each other.
Okay.
After that, P would ask me to go and feel.
Mm-hmm.
I would more than not, I would not ask P to go and feel because M was the one that,
That was your special game with your special brother.
yeah. And I know this is going to sound maybe strange, maybe bad. I don't know.
It's okay.
M made me feel good.
Yeah.
P not so much. He didn't really seem to understand what he was doing. And the way they approached me was different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he would literally come up behind me, put his arms around my stomach, put his head on my shoulders, and beg until I said yes. So it was never his idea.
Mm.
Where he would ask, I would either say yes or no.
Oh.
And if I said no, he would bother me until I said yes. And there was actually times I would bother him until he said yes.
Mhm.
But it was our special time. I did not know that it was wrong.
Yeah.
To me,
How
it
would
wasn't.
you? How would you? Your mom hadn't told you anything, right? She hadn't given you any
Nope.
sex education.
According to my little brain,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't sex
Mm-hmm. Right.
because sex was only something that married people did.
Ah, yes.
And I think that was kind of Mom saying some of that, but I don't completely know if she
Well,
even said that or not.
the idea, even though it goes back to, you were heavily religious based in your house, and it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense because just like I was talking earlier, it's the abstinence until marriage, so you don't need to know about it now type of thing. And so if somebody says you have sex when you're married, yeah, your child brain can think, oh, okay, well, then this isn't sex. That makes 100%
Yeah.
perfect sense.
And I knew not to tell, even from early. I knew that it was just our special game. And I'm not sure if M actually said it or not, but it was at least implied that if I said something to Mom or Dad, I would get into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not M,
Right.
me,
Yeah.
me, nobody else. And so I guess that's kind of how he kept me quiet about
Okay.
it. Plus, because it was our own special secret and
Mm-hmm.
nobody needed to know and stuff. But
Right.
it just and of course he didn't. If I started to say that it hurt, he'd pull
Mm-hmm.
back.
Okay.
So he always stopped when I said it hurt. So how can that be abuse?
Right. How could, yeah, yeah.
Plus,
It's
in the early
understandable.
80s, the word abuse was not part of kids' vocabulary.
No, not really. Not really. And I'll tell you from my perspective, my family, if we ever heard it, it was something, it was beating, it was that
Yep.
beating. Because my dad wanted to spank us with a belt, and my mom absolutely wouldn't, and that was abuse. And so I only knew abuse in the context of physical beatings.
Oh, I
So,
knew that too.
but I mean, the word, associating the word with an
Yep.
act, that
Yep.
is 100% all. Emotional abuse, sexual abuse.
Yeah.
What's that? Right. Yeah.
And another thing too, abuse in my mind was an adult to a child, a
Mm,
stranger to a child.
absolutely.
Never somebody that you knew. And yeah, stranger danger was the big thing back in the early 80s.
100%.
I started kindergarten in 83.
Okay.
And kindergarten, grade 1, both in school and in the church, I remember them telling us if anybody touches you where you don't want to be touched, tell.
Ah, don't want to be.
I sat there and I remember thinking, where do I not want to be touched?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't compute those.
Right.
But I also knew by the time I was in probably grade 2 that I didn't want to tell our secret because I would be taken away.
Oh.
Grade 2 was also the year that, no, it wasn't grade 2. I can't remember which grade it was. When I was 8. So yeah, grade 2. My grandfather passed away.
Okay.
And so we went out to BC because that's where they were living. It was my mom's parents. My dad's parents had already passed before I was alive.
Okay.
And I don't know what happened, but something happened out there. And that is the very first time I wanted to tell somebody. I don't know if it had escalated or what had happened, but
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time I felt like crying.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time that I so wanted to tell somebody. And the person I wanted to tell was my grandpa.
Mm.
And I remember going to look for him. And when I couldn't find him, I'm like, oh yeah, he's gone.
Mm.
And that broke me. And so it's like, nope, there's nobody else I can ever tell.
The one person you thought you could confide in is not there.
Yeah. The one person that I didn't have to be something or do something to get love from.
Felt that
Which,
unconditional love from your grandfather.
yeah,
Yeah, it's real special.
because I was one of his little princesses.
Aww.
Not that I can really see that anymore, but you know, I know I was one of his. And I've heard from one of my other cousins, female cousins on that side, that he did that with all 3 of us granddaughters.
He had a soft spot for the girls.
Yeah.
That's special. That's real special.
But by then, things were starting to progress.
Mm-hmm.
By the age of 10, I was starting my monthly cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started to be a little more careful. He would, if he knew he was ready to
Mm-hmm.
let go,
Yeah.
he would make sure he wasn't anywhere near me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can you guys hear that? Is that? let me close the window. Okay. They want to go to the pool. They opened our pool last weekend, so all the kids are out at the pool now. So, welcome, Steeris.
Hi, Steeris. I honestly, I do not know how my brothers knew what to do. One of the things that Em told me when we talked was that, because I asked him why he abused me, and he said he needed control over something. Because he was the oldest, there was a lot of responsibility put on him. And he was a miracle baby. He should not have lived. And we all grew up knowing that.
Yeah.
He was a big baby, over 10 pounds when he was born. He stuck at the shoulders. And so by the time they got him out was about 24 hours later. He was a dry birth and ended up with meningitis as a 1-day-old.
Yikes.
Should not have survived.
Right.
But Mom got on the phone with her mom, and within probably about an hour, Grandma had phoned people in Baltimore, in Ohio, all over the U.S. Yep, all over the U.S. and overseas, because my grandparents had actually met and married in Shanghai, China, as missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
So it went all over the world to pray for Em and
Mm-hmm.
my mother. So he technically shouldn't have lived, or should not have lived, without some sort of brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
He's perfectly fine.
It's amazing.
6'3" and 3/4", built like a football player.
Amazing.
So by the last couple of years of him abusing me, and even at 10 and 12, I still did not know it was abuse.
Well, yeah. This has been
It
your
was,
life. This has been
yep,
this was total normal for you. And if there was
it
nobody
was.
from I'm guessing there was nobody from outside that was telling you that this was abuse or that this was wrong.
Because nobody knew.
But I mean, just education in general,
Yeah,
saying, well, this is wrong. You have the one thing, well, if somebody doesn't want to, if somebody touches you where you don't want them to touch, well, you want them
yeah.
to touch because this is your special game.
Hmm.
That sentence that you said, Crystal, about what your brother said to you, that he needed something he had control over,
Yeah.
that sure does sound like he was abused by somebody else, because I've heard of that, because you don't have control over what's going on with you, especially if it was a situation where he didn't want it to begin with, or he was a little bit older and kind of knew this is
Yeah.
how he could do that. It really does sound like, at least maybe not, maybe he just learned from you guys, but it definitely sounds like
Years later, like even when I asked him if he had been abused and he said no, it was still probably about 4 years later that his wife was in treatment for an eating disorder at an inpatient place. And so he had gone up with his boys for a weekend.
mm-hmm.
And part of that weekend, with a family weekend, was the family had to actually participate in the group sessions.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And he was
makes sense.
involved with an art session. And he was just drawing, and he looked, and this is what my sister-in-law had told me. She says he was just drawing, and he looked down, and he broke, because he couldn't deny he had not been abused.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what he drew. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask. I do know that he remembers Mom hitting P's head against the kitchen floor, but I don't know how much M was abused.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that also comes to the fact my mother was abusive of all of us, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, everything. She beat us with a belt.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it was P and I in the room together because we had been fighting. So we both got it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I asked Matthew why he chose SA, he said, I could have hit you, but people would have seen that.
Mm.
So I chose SA so that nobody would know what was going on.
Makes
And a lot
sense.
of times that is so true, because you can't see it. You can't look at somebody and see
No,
that they're being SA'd most times.
unless you know signs and signals to look for, and you have something
Yeah.
compare, like you knew the child before and then you knew them after.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't just look at somebody and know. You can maybe guess, but
Yeah.
that's the best that you can do with something like that. Do you think that there was that? Do you think that your brother really genuinely cared for you, and that maybe this was a way that he could do it without inflicting pain?
I
That the
think
physical would have been pain, and you were getting enough of that anyway.
possibly in some ways. We were inseparable. After he graduated, he graduated the year I finished grade 6.
Okay.
And he went on a missions trip right away. He actually had to do his finals early so that he could be gone for the training
Okay.
to go away. And I went to camp, and P went to a different camp. And that was the very first year I had ever been to camp without M there.
Oh.
He was always a cabin leader when I was there, which helped because then I wouldn't get homesick. Which was nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Have somebody there with you.
Yeah. But that was the first year, and that was the year that I turned my life over to Christ.
Okay.
And began my faith journey.
Okay.
And P kind of did the same thing at the camp he was at. And I knew that the missions trip would change M.
For the better?
So I was hoping.
Okay. Okay.
Because I had heard so many missionaries come through our church and tell how things on the mission field were and how it had changed them. So I'm like, okay, he's gonna know all that stuff. And I think he did for a bit. But when he came back, it was that summer that I realized that I wasn't quite sure I enjoyed playing the feeling game anymore. I was a little nervous about it, and I wanted it to stop.
Were you thinking that it was maybe, did you have any thoughts that it was wrong at that point? Is that maybe why you were, or just that for some reason you just felt an ick
I
feeling?
don't think it was really that I felt like it was wrong. I didn't think we should be continuing. I had this uneasy feeling that it wasn't good. So
Kids'
I started
intuition is kids get intuition as well, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we discount that, I think, with children, and that's why we have to teach our children to go with your gut. If a guy gives you a creepy feeling, whether it's your uncle or grandfather or, or let me just say a person. It doesn't need to be a guy, because I never want to make this just a female thing. If they give you an uneasy feeling, that's based on something true within you. So good for you for listening to it.
So I started to try and put pressure on both of them to stop. P stopped a little faster because I learned to not always give in when he would beg. And he slowly kind of stopped that way. M, on the other hand, I need to back up into the summer a little bit to have things make a little bit of sense. He had always it was kind of implied that not only would I get in trouble, but that what we were doing, it would be worse. And by that point, we were really good at listening for the vehicle to come home. We lived out in the country, and our vehicle had a certain sound to it, because most of the time at this point, we were down in his room in the basement.
Okay.
I don't do basements anymore.
Understandably.
But that summer, before my brothers got home from their prospective locations, Mom and Dad decided to go down and changed the sheets on both beds. For some stupid reason, they wanted me down there with them. So I was down there with them. Don't ask me. I don't understand it either, even to this day. And as they went to change the bedding in M's room, Mom made the comment, well, maybe we should flip the mattresses. And I sat there going, please don't let the magazines be under there. Please don't let the magazines be under there.
Oh,
Because by that time, he had brought porn into the abuse.
okay. In the form of the magazines?
Yeah. He had 3 different hiding spots, and I knew exactly where all 3 hiding spots were, because there was times when I could sneak downstairs without him being around or Mom and Dad being around, and I would go find those magazines and look at them myself. And that was the beginning of my addiction to porn. But he wanted to look at the pictures, and then he wanted me to get into the position that the females in the pictures were.
Oh, so common. Oh, so common. My goodness. Yes.
I've never been very flexible. And those pictures were not easy. There was no way I could get into those pictures. But he would try.
Right.
So I'm sitting there going, I hope his magazines aren't under there. I hope they're in one of his other hiding spaces. I really wish it had have been the magazines, because the consequences might not have been so bad. What was under there was one of Mom and Dad's books. It was called Intended for Pleasure.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Do you think she had a sneaking suspicion that maybe her book was gone and she was looking for it, and the oldest child made the most sense that might have it?
No, not really, because she never looked in that closet anyways.
Okay.
Because the books, those kind of books, were in Dad's closet. And no one ever really went in there.
Okay.
Couple weeks after Em got home, Mom called him into her room. So any self-respected younger sister goes so that she can listen in. So I went in the bathroom, I shut the door, and I listened. And she literally asked him, have you ever had Crystal in your room? He said, yeah, once. And she said, don't ever do it again. I was so scared.
Yeah.
After that.
Because she mentioned your name. There's something there, because just finding a book on pleasure in a guy's, because he would have been, what, 18 at this point?
Yeah, about that.
Just finding, even if it was a porn magazine, finding something of self-pleasuring or just pleasure with girls or whatever in a room of an 18-year-old is not that odd of a thing. So to then specifically mention you, that's
the thing
interesting.
is, the book Intended for Pleasure is for married Christian couples. And at that point, he did not have a girlfriend. He did not actively have a girlfriend at that point in time. I don't know how she came to that conclusion, but she did.
Yeah.
By middle to end of October, he finally had his chance for us to be alone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my parents were actually home at the time. My mom had laid down. By this point, she was in the beginning stages of chronic fatigue syndrome.
Okay.
And so she had laid down to have a nap. Dad was out working in the shop. And I had decided to go down and play with my rabbit. We raised rabbits for meat. We also had chickens and pigs by this point. And so I'd gone down to play with my rabbit, and Em ended up coming out. He had built a little pad out of a couple of the rooms in my grandparents' old house, my dad's parents, the house that he had actually grown up in.
Okay.
And Em came and got me and took me. He said he had something to show me, and I knew what it was. But I didn't have a chance. My body did not have a chance to get prepared like a lot of times beforehand. A lot
Okay.
of times, like we knew when mom and dad weren't going to be home when we came home from school.
Right, right.
And by the time I got home, I was ready. I was waiting for him to ask.
Right.
Or if he didn't ask fast enough, I'd ask him.
Mm-hmm.
But he ended up taking me into his little pad. And that was the first time he entered.
Okay.
And it hurt like crazy.
I bet.
He had pushed me into a corner so that I could not move.
Mm.
And I knew I had to be quiet because Dad was less than 100 yards away.
Yeah.
He finished. He said, "This is for telling." And I said, "I didn't tell." But he wouldn't believe me. He wouldn't believe me.
He thought, otherwise,
finished.
how would mom have known to ask about you? Yeah.
He finished. He kicked me out, told me to get back to the rabbits because that was his thing. As soon as he was done, go get dressed and go on about your day. I just got back into the rabbit barn when Mom came down from the house. It gutted me.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at anybody for a long time. It was just after this that I was sent to the guidance counselor at school because of low self-esteem. I read well over 200 little teen books, like babysitter clubs and those kind of ones from back in the 80s.
Right. Remember them
90s.
well.
I read over 200 of those books in my grade 7 year. We had an influx of students because one of the other schools in the district only went from grade 1 to 6.
Oh, okay.
So they came in grade 7. They came to our school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was also starting to be bullied.
Okay.
From these new ones.
Mm-hmm.
We had a teacher that was picking on me a little bit, not as much then as years later,
Mm-hmm.
but I was scared. When they sent me to the guidance counselor, he was a male, I was so scared to be in that room because one, I didn't want him finding out, and two, I was scared he'd touch me too.
Yeah, yeah.
By then I knew something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I so wanted to tell one of our teachers, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to tell her multiple times a week. I'd write little words on a paper and have them in my hand of things I wanted to talk to her about. And after every time something happened, the names were on there for the next day. They couldn't figure out why my self-esteem was so low.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know why it was.
Right.
It was because of then that I ended up pregnant. And all through this, I'm still kind of thinking it's still normal. I'm still like all through those years.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
just, it was he continued to groom. He continued to
Mhm.
slowly make it worse and push the boundaries.
Right, right. But if
The
you didn't
last,
know where your boundary should be, that's, you
yeah,
know, that's easy,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, he'd push just a little harder, even if I said it hurt, just to try
Oh,
and get in a
okay.
little bit more,
Right,
or use his fingers or whatever. And
right.
at that point, I was only about 110, 120 pounds
Hmm.
in grade 7. He was 6'3 3/4" and built like a
Hmm.
football player
Yeah,
and
yeah. You
heavy.
stood no chance.
I didn't have a chance.
No.
For the last, from about age 12 to about age 14, he continued, and he would push me away. It had it more often than not had to be his idea.
Hmm.
There was only a couple of times he gave in to me, but it also hurt worse.
Hmm.
And I knew that. I knew that if I didn't go to him, it would be worse. And that's why I tried to go to him.
Hmm.
He was working away from the home, but he was still living at home.
Okay.
He was gone to Bible school, and, or no, he was in grade 12, and then he went to Bible school.
So
But
had
it just,
he continued to abuse you along these years too, that 12 to 14, or was it just
he, he had pretty much stopped by
Okay.
then.
Okay.
Within about 6 months of me starting to put the pressure on to stop, he did.
Okay.
He always thought that if M came in when P and I were together, he thought that M was mad and took me away because P actually thought that M had stopped.
Oh,
And
okay.
this is what P told me when him and I sat down.
Okay.
And I said no. He was taking me away because he wanted me.
Right.
And I was actually to the point where, at that point, where, oh, good, Matthew's finally coming and taking me. It'll be better now.
Yeah. How our
That
little
was,
minds, yeah, well, it gets all twisted up for us.
yeah, because he still made me feel good.
Hmm.
And he would do things that he knew I liked.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I had to do things that I didn't like to get what I liked.
Right. But it's like that's just the price you pay for being
Yeah,
able to do what you want type of thing. Yeah. No, I 100%
yeah.
understand.
By the time I wanted to tell between grade 7 and 8.
Hmm.
I went to a new camp that summer, and I so wanted to tell the staff. Now, I don't know if one of the staff had shared their testimony of abuse or what, but the next summer, the second summer I was there,
Hmm.
my cabin leader told about her grandfather abusing her.
Wow.
And I broke that night.
I bet. Yeah.
And I didn't know why, because abuse was not a term that I knew.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I just thought I was homesick.
Right.
And so I got them to wake up our camp leader, our cabin leader, and her and I actually sat out in the hallway and I talked to her about my grandpa. Because I didn't know what else. I didn't know why I thought I was dismissing grandpa again.
Right. Well, and because her abuse was still an adult and a child, you know,
No, oh yeah, hers was, yeah,
an
her
adult and a
grandpa.
child. And so
Yeah,
even though M was older at this point, it's still, it started on, he's still not,
There's
he's
still only
not the
6 years
parent.
between us.
Exactly.
Yep.
He's still, it's you still think of it as child on child, So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. By Christmas that year, I so wanted it to be done. I was hoping it was done.
Mm-hmm.
He had moved away from home by then,
Okay.
and those last about 6 months or so that he was actually at home, he was seeing a girl.
Oh, really?
So, and I know for a fact that he was sleeping with her and with me.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Not at the exact same time, but
No.
she would go
You're a little
home
different.
after a weekend or whatever of
Mm-hmm.
being at our place, and during the time when she wasn't there, if the opportunity allowed, him and he would abuse me.
Mm-hmm.
By December of that year, I was just in grade 9. I needed to know that it was over.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote this camp cabin leader, and I told her, I said, I don't know who else to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I said, something has been going on for a long time. And I'm really not comfortable with it anymore. And so I told her what we did. I told her about our game. And she wrote back and she said, you are being abused. I looked at that word. I'm like, no, I'm not. Abuse doesn't happen in the church. It doesn't happen in small towns. It doesn't happen in.
Right. Yeah. That was your reality.
And I just sat there and abused? I don't understand.
Right.
And so I wrote that back there and I said, I don't understand that word. And I listed off the reasons.
Yes. Does
Because
not compute.
those were the mentalities of that time in my life.
Yeah.
The early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
At this point. My mom wanted to go out to BC to visit her mom, and I was the one that went with her.
Okay.
It was middle of February, and so we were out there for about a week and a half. Well, while we were gone, this cabin leader phoned, and of course Dad said, well, no, she's in BC right now, and she'll be home such and such a day. And she said, okay, I'll call her back then. And of course, back then the phone was our main source of letters.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was no big deal for me to receive a phone call from somebody that I went to camp with.
Right.
And she phoned me and she said, I want to come up with the camp director. I'm like, no. Because I knew if she came up with the camp director, who was a male, Mom and Dad would suspect something right away.
Yeah.
So I agreed to let her come up with another staff member from the camp who by then knew my story. And they
So you
came
weren't
up.
ready for your parents to know about this yet.
No, yeah. I still didn't want them to know.
Yeah.
And they drilled me when they were up there. We went for lunch and then went to a park, and these two ladies, they drilled me. Are you sure this happened? What happened? They wanted details. I grew up in the church. Sex, any kind of those words were not allowed to be said.
Yeah.
female and male anatomy was not, those words were not part of our vocabulary.
Right. Yeah.
And so I kept saying, I can't remember. I can't remember. It had only been about 6 or 7 months since the last time he had touched me.
Right. But there's so much else that's going on within that
Yeah.
even though you told,
Yeah.
you still can't get the whole story out.
Yeah. I was also still scared that if he found out that I told, it would be even worse. Especially since he thought I had told a couple of years before.
Right. And it had already stopped for 6 months, right? And you didn't want to risk that starting up again or, anything like that. Understandable.
That fear continued until I was in grade 12, and I finally had the courage to charge both of them.
Good for you.
The only reason I charged P at that point is because I thought I had to.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't remember very much about P, but I thought I had to charge him at the same time because when I had given my original statement, which wasn't very much, I had to talk about both of them.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, if I'm charging and they see that there's been 2 that have abused me, they're going to kind of question. So I felt like I had to charge both of them. Thankfully, I can't thank him enough for what he did. I gave my statement in January and everything was over by the end of June.
Wow.
And the day that they were sentenced, they read my statement out in court. And at that point, I had no support from mom and dad. They would take me to my counseling appointments, which were about an hour away. But when it came to the charging, they sat on one side of the courtroom with P. I sat on the other side with my counselor. Oh, and P's brand new wife. And M actually sat at the back of the courtroom. And P was sentenced first. He only got probation and mandatory offenders counseling because he was only charged as a juvenile.
Okay.
M, because he was over 18 before it stopped, like he was almost 20 when it stopped, he got 2 10-month sentences and 2 10-month sentences and 1 2 years less a day to be served concurrently, plus mandatory offenders counseling, no probation for 5 years, and no contact, which helped a bit.
Right. How did you feel about the sentence length?
I was told that would be about what he would get, just because it's the biggest sentence they can give for what he did.
It tells you where the laws have come from.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But I am so thankful for him that day, what he did. After they had read my statement out in court, the judge deliberated, and when she came back, she said, there's too much discrepancy between the accused and the victim. She says, I'm going to have to hear testimony from the victim. And I looked scared at my counselor and said, this wasn't part of the plan.
Yeah, this is not what I agreed to.
We had talked, and she honestly believed that I wouldn't have to testify.
Well, it looked like up until that last minute that things were going, smooth sailing. So Yeah.
And it's actually a good thing that the prosecutor read my statement out in court, because Sam might not have gotten the sentence that I wanted for him, because I was asking jail time.
Okay.
He leaned over to his counsel, who was court appointed because he couldn't afford them.
Mm-hmm.
And he told them, he said, if that is what Crystal said happened, then that's what happened. I can't remember what
Wow.
I did.
Huh.
And because of that, he was sentenced. As we all broke court, it was lunchtime.
Mm-hmm.
He sat up at the front, head hanging low, kind of by himself at the defense table. And Mom and Dad were sitting with P and K, and so they stood up and they started talking. I stood up with my counselor and asked her, now what? I was against the wall, she was next to me, so she was trying to make me laugh at certain times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be looking at her laughing,
Right.
but Mom and Dad thought I was laughing at P
At the
and them.
situation and everything that was going on. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I asked my counselor what next is because in that moment, all I wanted to do was go and give my big brother a big hug.
Mhm. They didn't take them. They didn't take them right off.
No, they didn't, I don't, he did go straight to jail from the courthouse,
Uh-huh.
but I think they had to wait until the RCMP came to take him away. And
So
I
they
think
left.
that's why he,
Okay. So
like,
they didn't have to
he
be in
was
a
still,
cell right away. Wow. Huh. Yeah.
I don't completely know. That day was the grand opening or first day opening of a brand new courthouse in that community.
Oh
So
wow.
there was, I had been warned that there was a possibility there would be a lot of TV cameras.
Mm,
Thankfully, they were not, because ours was pretty much a closed courtroom.
mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think there was one person that I didn't know who they were, and they weren't a lawyer or someone that our family knew.
Right.
When I sat down and talked with him, he said he was actually one drink away from being homeless. And when he heard that I was charging, he gave a sigh of relief,
Hmm.
because we had grown up. There are consequences to your actions. And so
Right.
he had been waiting for almost 4 years at that point for the shoe to drop.
Huh.
And I guess he was scared.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
get it.
when I tried explaining, like, we ended up sitting down with a professional mediator.
And when was this in time after he got sentenced? Was this after he got out then later
Yeah,
on?
this
Okay.
was years later.
Okay.
It was just before I moved to the community I'm living in now. And I
Okay.
moved here 17 and a half years ago.
Okay.
My parents did not know why he was coming into the community that we were living in. He just knew that, or they just knew that he had some meetings that he had to go to.
Okay.
So him and his wife and I think their third one was born by then, had come into town, and she stayed at Mom and Dad's place with the kids while Em came to have the meeting with me. And neither one of us had told Mom and Dad what was going on,
Got it.
because we did not want them knowing.
Right.
Because Mom would have, oh, I need to be there, I need to be there, I
Yeah.
need to know
Right.
what's going
Right.
on.
Yeah. Insert herself.
Yeah, and neither one of us wanted that. But we sat down and we had the tough discussion. And I told him, I said, I came to you. I asked you as well. And he sat there and he said, no, Crystal, don't say that. I am the one that is completely to blame for what happened. He said, it doesn't matter that you came to me, it was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And him taking ownership of what he did,
That's big of him.
yeah.
That's big of him.
At the end of that conversation, we actually had a really big hug, and both of us were okay with it,
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't have given him a hug if he wasn't okay with it as well.
Right. It's still
But
family. That's still your favorite
yeah,
brother who you grew up with. I mean, those are feelings anytime you've got abuse within the family. Separating the I don't like from the I love you so much. How does how do you do that? How does your brain do that? So what made you want to
yeah.
sit down with him?
I thought it was important that I talk to him and get some answers.
Okay, so you had some stuff that you wanted to resolve.
Yeah.
Okay.
By then, there was little bits and pieces from before I was 4 that
Mm-hmm.
were starting to kind of like just these flashes. And I couldn't understand what these flashes were about. And so I wanted to ask about that. And
Okay.
I did kind of want to find out if he was being abused as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it was just I needed it for my own closure. I needed it for my own recovery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Drew.
Aw.
I just called you the wrong name.
I'm waiting till I get old enough that I go through the list of names before I finally land on my sons, I remember like my grandmother would like go through every person in the family before she's like finally like, oh yeah, that's it or whatever. Go ahead.
I quite often, Mom would quite often refer to me as Laura, so I will answer to Laura.
Any reason
my,
why?
my mom had a foster sister, and her name was Laura.
Oh, jeez.
And I've actually seen pictures of her when she was little, and her and I look a lot
You're
alike.
like, oh, jeez, wow, wow.
The funny thing is, she is 100% native,
Oh,
and I'm not.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm English, Ukrainian, and German.
Quite different, quite different.
Yep.
Let me ask you, at what point did your parents find out?
They found out when my two friends came up.
Okay.
They found out that weekend. M was at his girlfriend's grad that night. It was a Saturday night.
Mhm.
P was actually the one that told.
Oh,
Our pastor at the time, he knew, and he was kind of a support to P.
okay.
He kind of was supporting me as well, but it kind of ended that his main support was of P.
Okay.
And of course, my friends had gone back into town after they brought me back to the farm after we had talked, so that they could talk to the pastor.
Okay.
And then after supper, they ended up going downstairs and talking with P. And of course, P agreed that yes, that's what they had done, and yes, it was all three of them, and just completely confirmed everything that I had said. Of course, being the little sister that I am, I was listening in,
Just to make sure. Just to make sure.
laying on the floor in my bedroom with my ear against the vent,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because
So
like there was
what?
a vent that was open because we had the fireplace downstairs, and
Oh,
so the heat from the fireplace would come up into my room and into the rest of the house. And so I was listening in
right.
because they were
Right.
right down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy way to get some information.
Yeah.
What was their reaction?
Dad just kind of, he's very stoic.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of went, okay. No,
It's over and done with. What am I going to do now about it anyway? So,
we had also woken him up.
jeez.
He had gone to bed a good hour before. Mom started to cry. She wanted me to come and she wanted to hold me. Well, at 300 plus pounds, she didn't have a lap. And so it was really hard for her to hold me.
Mm-hmm.
But she wanted me right there. And of course, right away, she was, and you got to realize my mom is a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
Right away, she's like, oh, I didn't want to happen to my daughter what happened to me. And my brothers would lock me in the biffy and let the neighborhood boys in. And I'm going, okay. When we got home the day of sentencing, she
Mm-hmm.
said to me, she says, I didn't realize they had gone that far. I thought it was just touching. As if that makes it any better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
But
think.
she kind of had to turn it to be her thoughts and what happened
Mm-hmm.
to her.
Yeah.
She asked a lot of questions, and they said we need to get M to come home, and so Mom had to phone him, and all she was allowed to tell him was that he needed to come home and that it was something to do with Crystal.
Okay.
And he called back about 2 minutes after Mom got off the phone with him, and he said, "Is Crystal okay?" And Mom said, "Yeah, she's okay." He knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
He got there just after we got out of church the next morning, and he picked Peter up at the church, and
Mm-hmm.
they went home, and then I went home with the other four, Mom, Dad, and my two friends. And Pete told them what was going on, and he's like, yeah, I kind of realized that that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
And he admitted what he had done. He admitted having me in his room and admitted that it had gone on for a while. But yeah, it wasn't until I started to really remember what had happened
Mm-hmm.
and learning that it wasn't right
Right.
and that it shouldn't have happened,
Mm-hmm.
that I started to put the emotions with what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I
Understandable.
It took a long time.
I bet.
Up until about 17 years ago, I prided myself in not crying in a
Mm-hmm.
counseling session. None of my counselors had seen or heard me cry at that point. Um, Actually, no. One of my counselors had heard me cry when she had told me either you go to the doctors or I will be having you committed because I was struggling with depression.
Mm.
She heard me crying then. I went into a treatment facility that was inpatient, and it was there that I learned to cry and learned to start putting emotion where it belonged
Good for
and
you.
connecting the emotion.
Good for you. Well, you've come a long, long way on your journey, and you should be very, very proud of yourself. You should be
The one
very
thing
proud of yourself.
I want people to understand that if it didn't seem like it was abuse, but there was a sexual connotation to it, yeah, it was abuse. My
Absolutely.
my mom was also SA to
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, Hers was commenting on my developing body. She had to know, even with my brother, she had to know exactly where we were in our development. She would make comments. Shortly after my brothers were both out of the home, it became more, and even a little bit when they were just before they left home. She would walk around with nothing on, or with
Wow.
these little rompers on that were more or less a bathing suit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what she would wear all the time. But of course, it didn't have the straps. It came up to just below her. Or
Oh,
just
like tube
above her.
top type thing.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
had like it looked more or less like.
Did it have shorts?
Well, it was
Was it like shorts?
no, it looked more like a bathing suit on the
Okay,
bottom.
so it's high. Okay.
So it kind of looked like a pair of underwear
Mhm.
attached to a tube top, I
Yeah.
guess. In a
No, I
sense.
get it
And
exactly what you're talking about.
and
Yeah.
they used to be called rompers,
Okay.
and it was just held on by elastic at the
Yep.
top.
Yep.
And
Totally remember
that's
those.
what she would wear. But she would make comments to me. I still, because she had gotten sick when I was 12 with chronic fatigue, I was the one that had to bath her
Mm.
and dry her off. Even if Dad was at home, she still made me do it.
Hmm.
She had touched me at one point because we weren't allowed to have a bath together, or weren't allowed to bath on our own.
Oh, okay.
So there was the baths with my brothers,
Mm-hmm.
which didn't help because I remember being 4 and
Right.
still having baths with them,
Right.
playing with the crayons that you can color on each other and it just
Yep.
washed off.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was right in that family. I actually remember thinking, as she got sicker and sicker, she started reading articles because she was trying to figure out what was wrong with her. And back then, chronic fatigue wasn't really
Yeah.
on
No.
anybody's radar.
Mm-mm.
It was, yeah, it's just all in your head.
Yeah. Kind of like fibromyalgia. Just
Yeah.
they didn't have a.
And
Yeah.
most of the articles that she was reading was how spouses and partners left, how they had extramarital affairs, all that kind of stuff. And she was reading these out to us. And I literally remember thinking at the age of 12, how soon is she going to want me to take Dad over?
Oh, jeez. Oh my gosh.
Thankfully, she never did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Seriously.
Dad was always very careful not to let me see him naked in any way, shape, or form.
Good.
The odd
Good.
time I would see him without a shirt on, but that was the extent of it. He always had pants on.
Right.
So,
Good. Good. Well, you have just grown so much, and it's so difficult to recover from child on child abuse. I've relayed to you guys that I was in college before I was told that, yeah, it was a thing. I just, because I had wanted it, I wanted it too. That's why when you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly where you are. I know exactly where you're going. And until you have somebody tell you, until you have somebody validate that, yeah, this is wrong, this is abuse, this is not something that should have been going on, even if you asked for it, it doesn't matter. Even if it felt good to you, it doesn't matter. And being able to process all of that kind of information, it takes a while. It takes your brain to kind of get wrapped around that.
well, and we've been designed to. Our bodies have been designed to respond
Oh,
to
100%.
sex,
100%.
and that was kind of my fear, even in telling as well, because I liked it.
Right.
I sought it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even as I started to hear other people's stories, it was always, and this was the part that really confused me, because a lot of people would talk about how as soon as they had been abused, all they wanted to do was go and shower. and wash everything off. They felt ugly and gross and
Right.
everything.
Right.
And I'm sitting there going, that wasn't even a thought.
Yeah. Right.
Not that I would have been able to anyways, because a lot of times we were stopping as mom and dad were driving in the driveway.
Right.
Plus, baths were only allowed on Saturday night or special occasions.
Got it.
And once we were thing on our own, I had the bath first, then mom, then P, then M, then dad. And I was only allowed to have a little tiny bit of water in the tub. The tub couldn't even have the full bottom covered in water.
Wow.
Could only have it about half covered in water.
Wow.
So,
Interesting. Interesting.
because we hold all our water.
Oh, okay. So there was definitely a reason why you were rationing it out that way. Okay, that makes more sense.
Which
Yeah.
made it easier because when I was younger, mom would there could be more water in the bathtub if mom was there. So even after the three of us kids weren't bathing together, there was still times when I would bath with mom.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the times when she would touch me.
Yeah.
And that actually came out for the first time in a session.
Was it that you just remembered it, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we were talking, it completely came out. And I broke.
Yeah.
And yes, now I cry in counseling. I cry quite readily.
It's good for you when you're dealing with those kind of emotions, you know? I mean, there's a reason that, kids cry, at times when they're, so upset, the tantrums and everything, because their little bodies don't know what else to do, Yeah. So it's a good release.
We weren't allowed to have emotion growing up.
Mm.
And when mom would use the strap on us, she would strap us until we stopped crying.
Oh, wow.
And we had 15 minutes to think about why she had to use the strap. And if she could tell that we had been crying in that 15 minutes, we got it again.
Huh.
And it was a leather belt that was about that wide.
Yep.
And when it's on your bare bottom, it hurts.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Because I say that because literally I think my dad had gone back and my mom caught his wrist as he was going. She came running into the room. I was that close from, having that happen as well. So that's why I said I can only imagine, but I do recall that fear very well. Very well.
The times that she would say, "Wait until your father gets home," I would give a sigh of relief because I knew I wouldn't get the belt.
Oh.
Because by the time dad got home, she had calmed down. For one.
Interesting.
So more often than not, dad didn't even know. She could be yelling at us. She could hear the back door of him coming in, and she would stop.
Wow.
In an instant. The phone would ring. She'd be yelling at us, belittling us, doing whatever. The phone would ring. Hi,
Susie, how are you? Yeah. We were wait till your father gets home. That was the threat in my household. So yeah, just kind of the opposite as you. We would definitely like, no, please, mom. What do you want us to do before that? Anything but that. Yeah. Anything but that.
But when you have the negative or the sad emotions beat out of you,
yeah,
you don't even have positive emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how to be really happy.
Mhm.
We were allowed to be happy if she was happy. If she was upset, we had to figure out why and correct it and make sure she felt like a good mom again.
Right, right. So as
I
most of the
finally
time you're
stopped
just
that.
kind of numb, just kind of existing in terms of your emotions.
Yeah.
You're just there. So you had to, was it after they were sentenced, your brothers were sentenced, that you started to connect with your emotions again?
A tiny bit. I honestly can say that I didn't really start connecting with my emotions until I moved to the community that I'm in now,
Okay.
17 and a half years ago.
Mm-hmm. You
And
continued counseling throughout this time, right?
I had stopped for about 4 years, the last 4 years that I was in the small city.
Okay.
And Mom was so thrilled when she found out that I had stopped counseling, that I wasn't going, oh, you're all better now.
Oh, jeez.
No, I can't deal with it
Yeah,
when you're around.
yeah.
But I couldn't tell her that
Well, yeah, no, no.
because it was still so stuffed down that I could read what happened on paper
Mm-hmm.
because I had written it out.
Right.
But like even as they read my statement in court, it was like that was me.
Yeah, a third person almost.
I couldn't believe that it was even me that they were reading about. Oh, this has got to be somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
This is bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And your memory is going, God, it wasn't all that bad. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
But I had also separated. Um, I have another personality, and
Okay.
she's the one that, for the most part, held the memories.
Okay. So she's
It's just
been letting
been
one slip through to you now, kind of feeding you
well,
a little bit over the years.
she's the one that wrote them,
Okay.
and little bit by little bit, she's shared with me the memories, and now I can talk about them.
Good.
Um, it's not easy still, but
No, I
it
bet.
comes.
Do you know,
Thankfully, I'm
go
working
ahead.
with an amazing trauma therapist
Oh, that's
that
fabulous. That's
I can
fabulous.
actually say the words,
Mm-hmm.
and that has been so freeing. After my hysterectomy, or since my hysterectomy, I had to learn to say words that I didn't like to say,
Yeah.
like the P word.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I'm not going to say which P word that is right now because I
Things are,
can't.
yeah, right. Things are uncomfortable. It's just, yeah. No, I completely understand.
But she has given me the space where I am allowed to say those words.
Yeah.
And that has been so freeing because to me, everything had to be kept a secret.
Right.
And that's why I hate that word.
Mm-hmm.
Secrets? No. If
Yeah.
somebody asks you to keep something in confidence,
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing.
Right. Right.
I'll keep something in confidence. I will not keep a secret
Right.
because to
That's,
me, secret is bad.
yeah. Well, it just has that connotation. I was always told if you feel like you have to keep something a secret, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And,
Now I know that.
right. Yeah. That was something I heard when I was, well grown. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting that your other personality has been kind of leaking the memories to you in bits and pieces, because I was speaking to somebody else about this, and what I had heard, what I had read at one point in time, and it really seems to ring true every single time, is that for anybody who has forgotten things, repressed memories, just forgotten them, your brain allows you to know about them when it feels safe.
Yeah. When you're strong enough.
And that is such a crazy concept that your brain, your body is judging.
Yep.
Okay, you can do this. You can handle this. And so we'll let it go.
Yep.
That's wild to me. That's so wild.
More often than not, I am co-conscious with her.
Okay.
She very seldom takes over the body completely.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, having to deal with a monkey here.
That's fine. Well, you're not in those situations where she would feel like she would have to, right?
No.
Yeah.
She just recently completely took over my body.
Oh, wow. Was it something intense?
It was actually while watching a movie, and we
Uh-huh.
were in the movie theater. Thankfully, I was with Kim,
Okay.
and so I had a safe person with me that knew about her
Right.
beforehand and dealt with her beautifully.
Did something trigger that for her to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and and it's been so long since she has completely taken over. But I used to lose hours.
Right.
There was Sundays I would go to church, and I had to walk from one end of town to the other, or
Mm-hmm.
bike in the summer because I didn't have a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I would remember going to church,
Mm-hmm.
and I would remember starting to sing in church. Next thing I would remember is I'm sitting at my computer playing games. And I could judge about how long I had been sitting there by the level of the game that I was on.
Ah, yeah.
And sometimes it was 2 or 3 hours.
So you're like, I'm a time traveler.
Those times when you miss times like that is
Mhm.
extremely scary.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Because you could end up getting hurt.
Yeah, who knows what happened to you during that period of time? You have absolutely no clue. Absolutely no clue. And it's I think it's great that she protects you still so much, because if she ever did take you over, like you're saying she did, you know exactly what happened, why, because you can judge by where you were and when she took over. Okay, what happened? What do I need to avoid now?
Yeah.
Right?
But when it happens to come during a church service, it's like, what was that all about?
Yeah. Something,
So,
yeah, something triggered it, so who knows? But well, Crystal, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I think it's been wonderful to kind of take these concepts and these thoughts that we've been talking about and, apply them to a real life situation and see how this plays out. And as another survivor of child on child, I get it. And, I feel for you, and I am so proud of you for where you come from to where you are now.
thank you.
And you're so much stronger and so much healthier for it. So
Yes, I am.
great. Well, thank you, everybody.
I have absolutely no contact with either brother, and with P, that's my choice. With M, it's kind of a mutual decision. So.
And that's where you are now, and that's okay. Absolutely.
My family of origin does not exist. So.
Blood family and true family, I think, are totally different things. You definitely can choose your family and choose the people that you are around and can share with and rely on. Those are the people that you hold close. So, well, I'm so glad that you have Kim in the area, and that you guys can rely on each other and bond in that way. And if anybody out there has any questions, has anything to say, if you want to leave them in comments, you can. Otherwise, please feel free to email me. If you have a question directly for Crystal, email me, and I can feed it through to her, and she can make a decision as to how she wants to contact you or deal with that situation. But just love, 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 love to everybody, and I appreciate you guys standing out. We've lost a couple along the way, but that's okay. We got talking pretty late, but thank you for the ones who have stayed with us to the bitter end here. We will be
Thank you,
on,
everyone.
absolutely. We will be on Saturday at 3 p.m. as scheduled normally. We are going to be talking about love bombing. Getting the topics that I had pushed away, I'm getting them brought up again. So again, we're going to be talking a little bit about grooming, but in a different context, and grooming, manipulation, those sorts of things. So really, really important for adults, I think, to understand this concept, and especially if you're going out into the dating world, or even friends. There's love bombing in a friendship situation, a friendship context, and I hadn't really thought about that until I started researching this a little bit. So please join us for that. Crystal, thank you so much that you were here and willing to share your story. And everybody else out there, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Remember, you are strong, you are valuable, you are worthy, you are loved. Hugs and love, guys. Remember, survive together, never alone. Night.